Welcome, everybody. Today, I want to talk about a very sensitive topic, and it's why women business owners don't scale as well as our men counterparts. Now, some of them, and let me start with this caveat. Our younger sisters these days, they're changing things. But when you talk about women over 40, we have a hard time scaling. This is for you to step out, step up, and step into your greatness. So, why do women have a hard time scaling their businesses? Many women, not all women, many. Well, there's a few reasons. Let's talk about the stats first. Only 2% of women owned businesses in the US reach $1 million. And 35% of small businesses are owned by women. So let's talk about why we have a hard time doing that. Number one, it requires us to go at someone else's pace and collaborate with people. And it also requires us to depend on others because we can't scale alone. Anything great is done together. You can't really do it by yourself. So depending on people is inherently hard for some women. And I know for me in particular, it is. And society tells us that when we lead, we're bossy. They also tell us we're OCD, and I call it just put that fucking shit back where it belongs. They tell us we're controlling when we insert ourselves into a process that isn't being done properly. I call that excellence. But we are labeled these things because for generations, we were to be seen and not heard. And there are a lot of corners of our world that still feel like that. But again, our younger sisters are changing that. So let me just start with a very short story about how I learned not to listen to the labels. Back in my early career, I was repairing hardware on a bench. I was repairing servers. I was in hardware for many years. And I was a woman on the bench. And in those days, you know, we didn't know much. I knew I was gifted in this area. And I knew when a server came in and I was troubleshooting, I knew I was going to find the problem and get it right. Because as women, we are just wired to figure things out and solve problems. So I worked with a coworker who was very sure of himself and his abilities. And oftentimes I would watch him troubleshooting a machine and know exactly what was wrong with it. But because I didn't want to bruise his ego, I had to stay quiet. And here was the impact of staying quiet on me. I was the manager of that repair bench. And I was being measured by how long it took us to turn around repairs. So when a customer would ship their server in, we would troubleshoot it, fix it, pack it back up, and ship it back to the customer. So one of my metrics was turnaround time. So I would watch this guy literally take days to figure something out. And I already kind of knew what it was. And if I didn't, and it would bother me, I would wait until he leaves, get into the machine, and then call one of the superiors at headquarters, somebody who is more technical, and say, here's the issue. This guy would just not reach out for help, or a second opinion. And God forbid I came in and made suggestions. So this is just another example of why we stay quiet. Now, this is my generation, and it's not all women. Listen, some women just come out of the womb and they're ready to go. And I know I was. My mother told me I was bossy from the time I could speak. But you know what? The world and society told me that I was bossy and it wasn't a good personal attribute. But actually, I was leading. I was a natural born leader. So I kept quiet and I didn't insert myself because I knew it would cause me problems with my coworker. And technically, he reported into me. So I wanted to seem like I was trusting of his judgment, collaborative, and I wanted to be. But I also knew that I knew a lot more than he did. So if I gave an opinion or I suggested a troubleshooting tactic, he would get all but hurt. And really, he wouldn't talk to me for a couple of days. So I learned very quickly that I just had to kind of stand by the sidelines. And as women, we kind of accept that role. If it was a man, I think it would be received better. And then I say this from my generation. Our younger sisters are changing that, and our younger brothers, the men today, are really holding space for women and hearing their voices and allowing them to lead without labels. And I give kudos to you guys. But for my generation, it was very, very different. So in that circumstance, I actually let my metrics slide so that I could appease this guy who was working with me. And he was arrogant and he was entitled. And I think that not all men are like that. I just think it was him. But any suggestions coming from me were downplayed, were seen as manipulative, as controlling, as bossy. When at the end of the day, I just knew better. I just was smarter. And I didn't want to own that. I had to shrink myself. And we shrink ourselves. That's why we have a hard time scaling, because we don't ask. We don't trust ourselves when we know better. We don't step into it, lean into our intuition because we're told we're not supposed to, because it's bossy, it's controlling, it's manipulative. So, for the women out there that are in business, maybe over 40, and they're having a hard time scaling, let me give you 3 suggestions into what you can do today to kind of recognize when you're shrinking down, when you're staying quiet. Your body will tell you. And my body told me for years. I just didn't listen to it. I was constantly anxious. I was constantly in fight or flight mode because I was going to work with this person on the bench, highly stressed out on what the day was going to bring. Was he going to, troubleshoot, find out the problems, and was I going to be able to lead him? And then I was also coming home to the same type of person who, wanted a woman in their place. Your body will tell you. Your body will tell you. And the most important work that you can do as a woman, and especially if you're in business, sit and listen to your body. When there is something on the tip of your tongue that you want to say, but you don't, listen to your body. We don't trust ourselves. And we're born with incredible gifts. And one of them is intuition. One of them is that knowing. But we shrink ourselves. So listen to your body. You're going to feel when you have something on the tip of your tongue, but you just don't want to say it. You either want to keep the peace, you don't want to step out of line. Oh my gosh, screw that shit. Like, get that shit out of your mouth, because 90% of the time, you're probably right. Number 2, recognize it in others. When you sit at the table, whether it's in corporate America or in your own business, and you're talking to someone of the opposite sex, and you are, maybe stating an opinion, maybe giving some expertise advice on how something should go, watch that body language. Watch it. Watch for the dismissive body language when they fold their arms. If they're not dialed in and looking looking at you in the eyes, if they're just kind of wandering off, like they're not paying attention. Boy, oh boy, did I have that happen to me many a times when I was trying to get a point across, when I had an idea, you know, the eyes were just wandering around the room because what I had to say or what I brought to the table wasn't really relevant or good because of what I had in between my legs. So watch other people's body language. Number 3, get comfortable with pissing people off. Oh, yes. Get real comfortable with people not liking you for exactly who you are. This was very, very hard for me because I was a people pleasing, miserable bitch. I wanted everyone to like me. I wanted to keep the peace. I walked on eggshells at work, at home, in my extended family because I wanted everyone to get along and I wanted everyone to like me. You have to get really comfortable with being alone and isolated. You might be at the table where you're speaking truth and everyone else doesn't want to see it, and they will corner you and box you up. You got to get comfortable with that. You got to get comfortable with being called bossy. You got to get comfortable with being called a bitch. You got to be comfortable with being called controlling and manipulative and OCD. Oh my gosh, that one's my favorite. Like I said, it's not OCD, it's put that shit back where it goes. And it's not controlling, it's do it the right way, or I'm going to show you how to do it the right way. Some people would consider that bossy. And how do they say? Overbearing. I'm demanding. Oh my gosh, that was another thing. Demanding because I ask for things, because I ask for things to be done right, because I ask for things that I need from other people. It's demanding. So you have to be willing to let those labels come at you, but do not let them stick to you. Do not own them. I own them. I embodied them. I firmly believed that I was a terrible person, that I was demanding, that I was controlling, that I was manipulating. So I continued to shrink myself more and more and more every fucking day because I didn't want to be those things. But then one day, and I wish I would have realized this in my 30s, but I didn't. One day I woke up and I said, no, that's not who you are. That is not who you are. And you need to wake up and say, you want to be a good person, not necessarily a nice person. I want to be a good person. But as women in my generation, we were told to be nice and quiet. But I'm so glad. I give kudos to my younger sisters, to those women coming up now that are starting their businesses, that are just killing it and crushing it. Oh my gosh, girl, I wish I was born in this generation because I'd be a millionaire 20 times over. I give you kudos for your confidence and your strength and your ability to step in and lean into your greatness. I give you so much kudos. And I have a daughter in that age group who's crushing it. And I look at her going, wow, I'm so glad that she didn't embody those things from my generation. So the 3 things that you can start right today is 1, listen to your body. Get tuned in. Your body's going to tell you when your intuition is kicking in. And as women, that's our greatest superpower. Number 2, watch other people's body language. When you come to the table and you have an idea or you want to offer up some expertise or you have a solution to a problem, watch those eyes. If they're not dialed in on you and they're roaming or any other dismissive behavior, folding of the arms, leaning back, turning their body this way, recognize it immediately and call it out. Oh, you got to have courage for that one. Call it out. Say, hey, do you want to talk about this another time? I see you're a little preoccupied. Do you want to table this and we can talk about it when you can, dial in and we can work together? And then number 3, get really, really comfortable with people calling you names. And maybe even not liking you. Get comfortable with it. Don't own them. Don't let those labels stick. Say, I do not own that. You're calling me bossy. I'm a leader. You're calling me controlling. I want shit done right. You say I have OCD, I'm manipulative. That's because I want shit put away where it goes. And and I want to have a good outcome. And if you don't care about the outcome, and I do, then yeah, I'm going to insert myself. Sorry. All right. I didn't really know what I was going to talk about today. And the reason I picked scaling is because I'm in the midst of scaling and it is requiring me to be uncomfortable again. And that is expanding my team, trusting people, leaning on people. I mean, as women, we're dependent. We don't like to count on others. Very hard. And I'm being called to step up and step out. Step out of that comfort zone, step up and do the things that make me uncomfortable so that I can step into greatness. And a few years ago, I just said, I got to stop acting like a freelancer. You know, I'm running a company that's pulling 50K months, and here I am operating like a freelancer. So we are at an era and a stage right now in this business where it is requiring me once again to get out of the comfy couch and step into uncomfortable areas. And I know that it's going to be freaking messy as shit. And I hate messiness. Um, Not because I'm a control freak, because I just don't like messy. I know it's going to be messy. I know it's going to be lumpy because anytime you do something for the first time, it sucks. Let's just let's just own that and accept that. And then the next iteration is going to be better. The next one's going to be better. And then that shit just keeps evolving, evolving. And eventually it's great. So come with me on this journey. Step out, step up, step in. You know, because I know. And as women, we can't claim that because in our generation, we were taught not to. So it's time now to claim it. Things are different. This is 2024. That shit is over. Okay. And if you're with a man in your house that still has that old mentality, or you're at the table at work with those men that still have that mentality, it is time for you to move. Because you're not going to really step in to everything you're supposed to be if you're constantly shrinking yourself because your greatness is just too bright for everybody around you. It is time for you to move if you're in those situations, and move fast. Don't wait. I waited too long. I didn't move fast enough. I did not move when I was supposed to. And I knew I had to move. But I was conditioned to believe that my outspokenness, my direct form of communication, me asking and demanding for basic borderline, like baseline respect was being demanding. If you're in these situations, you have to move. And especially if you're in business, a woman owning a business cannot afford to shrink herself, cannot afford not to trust herself, and cannot afford not to dial in to her greatest superpower. And that is her intuition. We cannot afford to do that. That's why only 2% of us reach the million mark in the United States. That is why. Because inherently, as women, there are corners of society, and not all corners, and not all men. And I want to make sure I say that. Not all men, not all corners. But there are still corners. In my generation, there were many corners. Okay. It wasn't just 4. There was like 12 of them. And I was in them because I was ambitious and I was motivated. And because I was ambitious and motivated, I was demanding because I wanted shit done. If I have a to-do list, let's get it done. I don't want to wait 3 weeks to get something done. But because I demanded to get things done and get them done right, I was a bitch. Where are you? Is it time to move? I waited too long. Like I said, if I would have moved 10, 15 years ago, I'd be a millionaire 20 times over. Mm-hmm. I'm on that journey now. But look, I'm in my 50s and I just started to realize this stuff in my late 40s. And that's probably the regret that I'll die with. You know how they say, oh, don't die with regrets? I don't really have many, except for that one, that I didn't know sooner how amazing I was, that I didn't know sooner how smart I was. Well, let me correct myself. I knew, but I was conditioned to question it because of what was between my legs. And especially for people of the opposite sex, men or women who define themselves as men, identify as men, even some of those folks in my generation have the same mentality. And again, I'm giving super kudos to my brothers and sisters of this generation. I mean, you guys are killing it. And I watch the young couples around me, and I watch the men give space for their women, and I watch them let them lead. So ask yourself if it's time to move. It might be time to move. If you're trying to scale, and if you've been in business for more than 5 years and you haven't moved the needle, it might be time to look around in your personal life and inside. What's happening within you? Why aren't you getting out of your own way? And I was one of those people. I didn't get out of my own way. I kept myself in a box because I wanted desperately to be liked. I wanted to be that role, that mother, that wife, that quiet woman at work who doesn't cause trouble. Oh, we cause trouble. We speak and we cause trouble. Let me tell you something, girls. Go out there today and fucking cause trouble. Don't stay quiet. And when someone is disrespecting you, call it out. Don't allow it, because when you allow it, you train that person to continue on, whether it's at home or at work. Do not allow that shit to happen. Nip it in the bud on the first time. I let it go on for years and years and years because I wanted to be easygoing. I didn't want to be demanding. I didn't want to be a bitch. So I let someone disrespect me over and over and over and over again for years and years and years. And finally, I got to a point where the walls started coming down around me. And I said, this shit is not going to fly. This is not how my story is going to go. I am not going to live the rest of my days in situations where I am not respected, where I am not accepted for who I am. When I ask for something that I need, that I'm not being called demanding. When I want something done the right way with excellence, that I'm not being called a control freak. It's my control, a manipulator. That is such a crock of shit. I know a lot of men in business who do what they do very well, with excellence, with great detail and precision. And they demand that from their teammates. They're not called controlling. They're called good. He's really good at what he does. And again, I am speaking of a specific generation. I don't know if there's men of this generation that are like that. I haven't seen a lot of them because, like I said, this younger generation, they are killing it. They are crushing it. These women are not accepting the labels and the roles. And the men are holding space for their opinions, for their leadership, for their intuition. They're holding space for that. And I love it. So kudos to you guys. All right. I know I've said a lot, and I just want to make sure that, especially for a woman who's over 40, who has a side hustle, girl, you don't have a fucking side hustle. You have a business that you work on part time. It's not a side hustle, it's a business. Treat it like a business. And number two, if you've had that side hustle for more than 5 years and you've wanted it to become your full time gig, your full time work, there's a reason why it hasn't. It's not because you're not smart. It's not because you're not motivated and ambitious. It's certainly not because you're lazy, because if you are taking care of a family or working a full time job and you have a part time business of your own, you're definitely not lazy. So, what is it? What are you conditioned to believe about what you can do and say? That's what you have to ask yourself. What have you been conditioned? And I had a mother who was very independent, very strong. And she told me that I could be or do anything I wanted to. Didn't matter if I was a girl or not. She said, you want to be a construction worker? Go be a construction worker. But when I got into society and I got into school, and, I watched how the girls who were nice and quiet got treated so much better than someone like me who spoke out. So I learned very early on, be quiet and things go so much better for you. You might get to be first in line. You might get to sit at your favorite lunch table if you're nice and quiet in class. And then when you get into work and you watch women rise and get raises, and not all women get raises because they can eat shit and get along with everyone and stay quiet and work around bullshit. You learn very quickly, hey, if I want to go up the ladder and I want to make more money, I got to patronize and appease everyone to do that. I can't speak my truth because I'll be labeled difficult. I can't insert myself and develop somebody mid-process because I'll be called controlling. Wow. It really, really saddens me to think that I wasted so many years trying to fit in to a box I was not meant to be in. And if you are running a business part-time and you've had it more than 5 years and you've wanted this to be a full-time job, I would start with asking yourself, what have I been told about myself? What have I been told that I'm supposed to do and not supposed to do? What have I been told? How have I been conditioned? My mother raised me to think that I could do anything I want. I played the guitar at 13. I joined a band. I was one of the only female lead guitar players in my industry. Now they're all over the place. I love that. I love seeing girl guitar players. But I was always told, wow, you're really good for a girl. We're told that we're less than. And I speak for many, many women in my generation. I know I do. I know there's women who come home from work and cook dinner and then run the kids all over and spend their entire weekend scrubbing and cleaning and doing laundry while everybody else is lounging on the couch, watching football, golfing. Don't tell me that shit don't make you resentful after a while. And then you keep quiet because you want to be loved and liked. And after a while, you become so resentful that you finally say something. And now guess what you are? Miserable. You're a bitch. You're demanding. It's always something. You could call it gaslighting. You can call it whatever you want. I call it just plain ass disrespect. I call it plain ass disrespect. So I know there's a lot of women in that role. I know there's a lot of women running a business right now who are running the kids all over. Look, ladies, I have been single coming up on 4 years. This is the best place and space that I've been all my life because it allowed me to take a look at what I believe about myself. And it's because I was told that's who I was. And after a while, guess what? You believe it. I believed it. Deep down in my soul, I didn't. Your soul knows, like, That's why I say, listen to your body. You got to listen to your body. We're not dialed into our bodies enough. That's why, because we're always doing and moving. But if we just sit in situations where we feel this thing coming on, can't put a word to it, but you can feel it. Something ain't right. There's something in your gut, but we ignore it because we don't deserve to explore it. You know, and I knew better deep down, but I shoved it down. Because I was told that I was wrong. I was told that being direct with my form of communication was being overbearing and overwhelming. I was told that asking for what I needed was being demanding. How many of you ask for what you need and get some attitude, whether it's at home or at work? How many? Rolling of the eyes. Oh, okay. How about the saying, happy wife, happy life? If more men would focus on their wife's happiness, maybe they would have a happy life. But I got news for you guys. Her happiness is not your job. Your job is to give her space, whether you're her boss or her husband, to give her space and allow her to express what she needs. And if she's home on a Saturday and she's on her hands and knees scrubbing the floor after a 40-hour work week, let me tell you something else, fellas. Don't go in the living room and sit on the couch and put the TV on. I can promise you, your relationship won't last very long. She will look away from that for a while. And there's some women that have looked away from that shit for 30, 40 years. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm so glad that my awakening happened when it did. I mean, although I feel like I'm late, it could have been when I was in my 60s and 70s. What a waste of my talent. Now I'm like, holy shit, girl, you're smart. You're talented. You're motivated. You're ambitious. Look around you and what you've accomplished. I would have never, ever acknowledged that about myself. I wanted to. I knew it deep down inside, but I was told I wasn't. So ask yourself, what things do you believe about yourself because someone else has told you? That's not who you are. And as women, it's very hard for us to scale our businesses because many of us, not all of us, many of us have been conditioned that leading is bad, that asking for things is not appropriate. And oh, by the way, don't ever ask for money. That's even more inappropriate. That's why I think it's like 5% of funding goes to women owned business out of the 100% of funding that's out there. Because we don't like to ask for anything, but we really don't like to ask for money. And if you're hyper independent and people tell you that you're trauma, say bullshit. No, that is not trauma. I mean, don't get me wrong. In some cases, it might be, but a woman who is hyper independent has been conditioned to believe by proof, by evidence, by reoccurrence that the people around her, the person that's supposed to care for her most, whether it be her father or her husband, cannot be depended on. That's not trauma. That's learned behavior. Because we've been disappointed. So you can call it what you want, label it whatever you want. But I can tell you that very independent women have seen time and time again over their lifetime that they cannot depend on the men in their lives who are supposed to care for them the most. And even at work, when your boss is a man and he is supposed to protect you and defend you and give you the resources you need and the support you need to get the job done, and he doesn't come through, well, that teaches us we have to do it on our own. We have to be resourceful. Why do you think women are so freaking resourceful? Because we have to be. We can make some shit out of nothing. And remember this, ladies, your intuition, the thing that you are born with, you come out of the womb with, is your greatest superpower. And we don't give intuition enough credit because we don't sit down and listen to what it's telling us. I was in a relationship, terrible relationship, abusive relationship for 16 years. And my intuition knew, I knew within 10 months of being with this man. I knew within 2 years. But because I had a previous failed marriage, I was convinced it was me. And guess what? It was. Because one, I was attracted to the same type of person. And number two, I allowed it to happen. So while I give myself compassion, I am by no means a victim. I just didn't know any better. You know what? Let me take that back. I knew better. I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust myself to move when I knew it was time to move. When that guy was swearing profanity at me because I didn't breastfeed in the manner he wanted me to, I knew right then and there, I wasn't going to marry this guy. And he wanted to get married, but I knew right then and there that he was on borrowed time. But I didn't have the fucking courage and I didn't trust myself enough to move out of the situation because I believed what I was told. I believed what I was told about myself. I no longer believe those things anymore. And once I started to embrace who I am and what I can do and what I know, my life immediately got better. My income doubled, tripled over time. The people around me were much better for me. And it was hard. It was hard because you have to have courage. You have to step up. It is stepping up and doing the things that make you very uncomfortable, because it's really comfortable to be in that situation that you're so familiar with. But whether it's a relationship at home or a relationship at work, and I had both, do not allow them to tell you who you are. Don't do it. Now, there are some people that might disagree with this, and you might call me a men hater. I'm certainly not a man hater, okay? I have the most beautiful men in my life around me. My son, my brothers, they're beautiful men. These aren't men that, don't hold space for women or disrespect women. But I've been around those men. I've been around them. I've been around them at work. And I certainly spent a long time in my own house with those people who told me who I was, because I was asking for what I needed, because I was calling out disrespect. This one particular time, and I talk about this one particular time because it's seared in my brain for all eternity. And it was a defining moment in this relationship when I was having a hard, my daughter was born and she was having a hard time latching on. And I kept turning positions, and I wouldn't listen to what he was trying to tell me. I was just so caught up in the moment. It wasn't that I just didn't want the advice. I was stressed. I was just trying all these different things. I knew sometimes these things worked, sometimes these things didn't work. So I was kind of really just caught up in the moment. And when I didn't do what he wanted me to do, he called me an effing a-hole at the top of his lungs, so loud that my 12-year-old son came out of his room and came into our room and said, "Why are you yelling at my mom like that?" Defining moment. I didn't make a move then. My daughter was, 10 months old. But that day, the very next day, I should have packed his shit up and told him get out, because that was very much a red flag. And then, that stuff just snowballs. Oh, sure. He paid a penalty the next day. I asked him to leave, contemplated whether I was going to stay with him. And of course, brought him back. And I kicked him out many a times for that type of behavior and kept bringing him back. So he knew that, as long as he stuck his tail between his legs and said he was sorry for all the terrible things that he did to me and my kids, that he would be allowed to come back. And the same thing that goes for those men at work. When you walk into that office and you have that private conversation and he says, "You're right, I shouldn't have done that." And then 3 weeks later, he does it again. Red flag, girl. It is time to fucking move. All right, that's enough for today. I'm just so passionate about this, and I don't want one woman on this planet, not fucking one woman, to believe what she's told about herself, to shrink because her greatness is too much for the people around her. I don't want one woman to experience that ever again. Not my daughters, not your daughters, not my nieces, not your nieces, not you. I don't want you to believe what you're told about yourself. Remember, ladies, we want to be good people. We don't necessarily want to be nice people. Have a good day.